Welcome to the first training round. Thank you for being here. And let's welcome Artem for his speech titled, Do You Really Know Why We Think So? But before we start, let me mention that this is the first training round event. There are more to come, so please stay tuned with the future updates. We will be posting next lectures on the Telegram group chat.
Do I need to introduce myself or you will? Okay.
It would be great.
Okay, yeah, I think so. I would start with a short request if for the participants it's okay to turn the cameras on. It's good because like when you can see each other, it's a bit it enhances the interaction. So if it's okay for you, please try to do it. And I'm pretty open to any questions or any comments during the talk. So if you want to interrupt me, it's okay. The best things are done in the interaction. So when you enter, it's always good, both for me and for you, because you learn something when you think during the dialogue, and I learn something about what I present. So it will be great. Again, so now let me quickly introduce myself. I graduated from a bachelor in higher school of economics and new economic school in Moscow. Now I'm a master student in Rome in the University Louis and EIEF. So it's a double program. I work as a research assistant at MIT Sloan Business School. Before that, I had assistantships in Sciences Po, it's in France, in Rome, in Moscow, and also in University of Bristol. Now I also work as an organizer of new economic school competition for high school students. So that's more or less quick introduction. If you, after the lecture, for some reasons you want to reach me, there is my email. It's pretty short, so it's okay. And now I will briefly give a roadmap of the lecture. So the first part of the lecture of our talk will be about the possibility of the past events to shape the current views of people. We will talk about the very striking fact in economics that has been okay. It's not really a fact in economics because it has been before explored by historians, by political theories, by generally social science at all. That there are some things that happened pretty long ago and that can still influence our today's life. And after that, we'll try to think how these views can be changed. So can we do something to overcome this, to break the circle and maybe the most common answer is education. So we'll talk a bit about the extent to which education can change the views of students. But let's start with something. The general thing with which we will start is the following. When we think about the modern economics, typically the first associations that come to our mind are about stocks, profit, cartels, monopoly, competition. So it's about really markets, firms, and it's a bit. It seems for us that economics has a certain number of topics that it explores and does not go beyond that. But this view on economics is a bit outdated at best. In the 1970s, there was a guy whose name is Gary Becker. I don't know whether you have heard about him, but one of the things that Gary Becker did is the developing of the idea of economic imperialism. So the economic imperialism is a view according to which economics as a science has a right or has a possibility to enter into different fields and try to answer to the questions, to some different discussions that happen in that fields using the economic methodology and and this way is actually how we will use economics during this talk. So it will serve for us as both the way of thinking about stuff and as a toolbox. Speaking about the toolbox, it is the part which I will more or less ignore because I will rely on that, but very implicitly, in the sense that it relies on pretty advanced mathematics and statistics. So this is the approach which I will discuss a little bit, but as simple as possible. But what will be more important for us is economics as a way of thinking. So let me try to elaborate a bit on this. So basically, when we think about economic view on different phenomena in real life, two main ideas that come to our mind are rationality and equilibrium. Rationality is basically the idea that when people make their decisions, they try to do the best they think they can do. It does not necessarily mean that people care only about themselves or that people are selfish and egoistic or anything else. It just means that, I don't know, if a parent cares about the children, the parent is trying to make the life of their children as good as it can be. If the society decides how to divide labor in the society, it tries, especially like if you think about some primitive societies where there are very direct choices by the society. The community tries to divide labor so that the one who is more efficient in something actually does this thing. There are some obviously constraints to rationality which matter sometimes, like the fact that people sometimes are restricted in their mental abilities. Sometimes people are prone to addictive behavior or some cognitive biases. These things are also explored by economists, but will be of less importance when we discuss the things that we are going to discuss today. The second idea that we will be exploiting is the equilibrium. So we will think about the certain outcomes that we observe in real lives, the certain phenomena, as a result of the independent choices or sometimes dependent choices made by different people. So we will try to understand how the decisions, how the certain factors influence decisions of different people, and how these decisions form the result. In this way, using this economics as both a way of thinking and a toolbox, economists try to approach very different issues. These issues include gender norms, history, media, politics, education, languages, values, beliefs. So there is a very not much that economists didn't try to explore, and it's a bit of imperialism. It's a bit of the economic imperialism in the sense that Gary Becker described it in the 1970s. What the first idea and the main idea that we will be exploiting for the upcoming minutes is the fact that past institutions in history tend to influence the norm and the reality centuries after they become irrelevant. So when we think about the certain events that happened maybe in the medieval times or in the prehistoric times, some of them influence what people think and do today. Why is it particularly striking? Actually, when we look at some recent events, the effects of them disappear pretty much. They fade away in maybe decades. When we think about, for instance, Second World War and the occupation of by Nazi Germany of some territories of Europe, at some point, I think for the Western Europe, researchers tried to investigate for how long the military, the war influenced the territories that were where the battles occur, and the effect of the battles themselves disappeared in decades, mostly because of the policy of the government to specifically target the territories which were subject to the huge losses. So this is actually the mystery. The things that happened just decades ago may disappear, while the things that happened centuries ago still influence. And first, we will try to see whether it's really true, like whether we can really establish a case or establish a certain example when we really see it. And after that, we will try to answer why this happens. So let's start with a certain phenomenon which we observe in real life, and then part by part we will first establish whether it's influenced by the events that happened in a very, very long ago, and after that we will switch to the mechanism part. So we will try to understand how could the past lead to that. Here you can see a result of the survey by the Pew Research Center about the extent to which people agree with gender equality, basically. Here you can see the share of people who agree with the statement that when jobs are scarce, men should have more right to a job than women. And there are countries where the dominant, the prevalent majority of people believe that it's true, like Tunisia or India or Pakistan. And there are countries when pretty few of people believe in that. United Kingdom, Spain, United States. Actually, there are some more recent surveys. This survey is from 2012. There are some recent surveys by World Value Survey, I think, maybe just a few years ago. There was no ready-to-go graph with it, so we have an old one. But the thing is the following. Why do countries differ that much in that respect? Why do in some countries people believe that believe it's in more pro-gender equality norms, while in some countries this change does not occur? And part of the story will be explored by us in a few minutes. And the article which we are going to explore is Women and the Plow. So the plow is presented as a second picture. So the picture on the right, this is the plow. And we will start with cultural anthropology. Actually, that's a strange thing about the life, because when I was a high schooler, for me the different subjects that were taught in school seemed to be pretty different, and there was like no really interaction between them. Maybe it's a matter of my school, but at some point you try to you believe that the things are pretty different and they don't intersect too much. While in reality, especially in economics, you use results, you use the ideas from different fields to understand the world. So, and one particularly important field for economists is anthropology. Why anthropology? Because anthropologists, using their very specific emphasis on the primitive societies, try to understand who people are and why they behave in the way they behave. Economists actually do the same. That's instead of primitive societies, they typically use some modern fancy data, but the logic is pretty the same. So it's a different way to see more or less the same questions. And for them, from the anthropology, the economists notice a very interesting idea, and the idea is the following. Differences in gender norms and gender roles are rooted in the form of agriculture traditionally practiced in the pre-industrial period. So before the Industrial Revolution, there were two main types of cultivation: shifting and plow. Shifting cultivation relied on the usage of hoe and digging stick. So basically, the idea of shifting cultivation is that you have some field, you use that field, and you use hoe and digging stick when you are trying to do something with it, and that you put this field into the fire and switch to another field, and then you basically at some point return to the same field. Plow cultivation works a bit differently, in the sense that you have a plow, and this plow requires pretty much of the upper body strength. So you need to be physically very developed in terms of your upper body to efficiently use the plow. So can anyone guess what happened to the regions where there was plow cultivation? I'm not sure whether I can see the chat, but so ideally you can answer with your microphone, but maybe I can see the chat actually. Let me check.
I can monitor the chat if you'd like, but yeah. I can't see any guesses as of now.
Okay, so okay,
maybe we need a little help.
Okay, so let me try to rephrase the question and then so there were two types of cultivation: shifting and plow. And shifting cultivation was relatively easier in the sense that you need to be strong, but not that strong, especially in terms of your upper body, to when you use a shifting cultivation. For plow cultivation, because it's more capital intensive, it's a bit different. You need to be physically strong. So the question is, what is your guess on which cultivation led to the more gender roles, like more egalitarian, more equal gender roles? I think we have a first guess. Yeah. Yes, we have a. Yes, you need men to plow. Yes, yes. Oksana is right, and when we have a plow, we need men to go to the field and use the plow. With shifting, we can interchange. So we can have a day when there is a woman who goes to the field. We can have a day when the man goes to the field. It's like it's more interchange. But with plow cultivation, you need a man, because man is more, unfortunately or fortunately, men are more efficient in using the plow. So the hypothesis of anthropologists was that in the cultures with plow cultivation, the more sexist, the more anti-equal, anti-gender equality norms developed as a result of different forms of agriculture and of the division of labor that came from the very natural very natural circumstances. And here comes the difference between economics and other social sciences, because for anthropologists, for sociologists, especially in the 20th century, the main intellectual result was to develop an idea. And developing an idea, please understand me right, is not an easy task. So you are trying to understand the world, you think deeply, and the thing that for economists now, the necessary task is not to create an idea of how the world works, because these ideas are often developed in the literature in other social sciences, including anthropology, political science, sociology, or something else. The key idea for an economist is to develop a way to test these hypotheses, because typically when we think about social sciences for the same question, for the same problematic area, we have different approaches, we have different schools that have very different views on the same things. And when we read the texts with their arguments, they may sound compelling. And economists are kind of engineers, in the sense that they're given already some hypotheses, some texts written by other fields, and they're just trying to check. Trying to check and trying to invent a way that really checks this hypothesis is not always an easy task, to say, and often it's quite difficult to find really a context in which it's appropriate to test. And also here is where the mathematics and statistics enters the chart, in the sense that you need some data analysis to really understand what's happening. So let me be quick on that. Alberto Alessina, who worked in Milano, and his courses in this paper actually combined pre-industrial ethnographic data on different tribes and different societies that lived. I think the vast majority of their data is from Africa. They have some data from North America and Asia. I'm not sure about how well South America is represented. I don't think that it was represented really good in this ethnographic data that they had. And this pre-industrial data was combined with the survey-based measures of the individual views on gender norms, on gender roles, as well as some data on some results of the gender equality. So some measures of gender equality, including female participation in politics, female participation in the labor market, and so on. And what the researchers have found is actually that when we look at the cultures where before that the traditional plow use was pretty common, we find that these cultures now have higher gender inequality and more positive attitudes to gender inequality, as well as lower female labor force participation. It is less common in these countries and in these regions within countries to have a woman to run a firm, and lower female participation in politics. The thing is, can we really interpret these results in a causal way? So what do I mean? Is it true that because of the plow cultivation, now we have this? And the answer is not that simple. Because when we think about different ways of cultivation, we may have the following guess. Actually, some cultures and some communities may prefer plow cultivation over shifting cultivation because they originally have unequal gender norms. So if you have some gender norms, if you have a society that believes that women should stay at home, then the society will be more likely to choose the plow cultivation. So the plow cultivation may itself be a result, not a reason, of some gender norms. And this is actually a challenge. So we find some result, but then we see what may be not compelling about this result. And let us try to make this result sound more compelling. What can we actually do? We will try to somehow understand why some regions choose plow cultivation while others did not. And what can be other reasons? We actually first we saw that there are gender norms that may lead to the choice of some type of agriculture. But in fact, the choice of the agriculture is also driven by what we are going to grow. So I'm not a big expert in agriculture, so I'm more citing the article, but I will try to sound compelling. So there is a plow, and for some crops, for some cereals, it's beneficial, while for some others, it's really not needed. And these different crops are more suitable in some regions because of some geoclimatic stuff, because of the land, because of the soil, while some others are not really suitable. So here is a kind of random, you see here is a kind of idea of randomness, in the sense that for some natural reasons, some territories are more likely to use the plow, while some others are less likely. Just not because people there are different, but because the geoclimatic conditions are different in these territories. And we'll actually try to, what the authors did is that they try to understand, try to exploit this variation caused by geoclimatic conditions. And they found that if you think about the regions that are pretty similar, but one region is, because of the geoclimatic reasons, more likely to use a plow, then in these regions we observe the more unequal gender norms, we observe less participation of women in the activities outside of the house. And this way, it sounds more compelling. So we have found some criticisms that may be relevant, and we were trying to somehow address it. Let's see what we have done so far. There was a big idea that we have read in some fancy anthropology book. Then we were trying to establish whether it's really true. Can we check whether the data, whether the reality meets this idea? Because many ideas seem to be compelling until they meet the reality. And we found that, it's true. It's true, and it is pretty likely that we really observe what we have thought before. But the next question is why? What is the mechanism? Why do these views persist? Like, there have been centuries after that. And the two main approaches, two main ways to answer are the following. First is that when we think about generations and generational change, there is some persistency in the views of parents and their child. If your parents are conservative, you are more likely to be conservative. If your parents are liberal or pro-feminism, you are more likely to become pro-feminist. And in a certain sense, it may hold on an individual level. So when some transition from a parent to a child and so on for many generations. Another way of thinking about why these things can persist is an institutional approach. So according to an institutional approach, these gender norms create some practices, some ways of distributing of the power in society that even after the society switches to a different form of economy where agriculture has a lower place, still influence the society. So, for instance, religious institutions or political institutions. And actually, it's a matter of the external for the individual conditions. So it's a matter of how our society is organized because of the history. How to disentangle these two potential channels? We need to find an individual who lives with the different institutional structures. So we would like to find some guy whose parents were raised, whose parents had maybe some, who is the ancestor of I don't know, of a society with a plow cultivation, but does not live in a society with a plow with the descendants of plow cultivation. So we need someone for whom we have one channel and don't have another channel. But where can we find that guy? You may think for a minute, but I will present an answer in just a few seconds. So the easiest way to disentangle the individual channel and institutional channel is to look at the migrants. We see the child of the migrants to the US. So even though they were raised in the families and they have all this generational channel, they were initially raised in a country with different institutions. Hopefully more gender. To what extent they're gender equal? That's a good question. There are some good papers that analyze gender equality in some European countries and the US. And it's not always good, especially when we think about 1990s, 2000s even. But anyway, we look at the ancestors of these migrants and we find that for them, even though they were raised in different countries with hopefully gender equality norm, actually they still believe that that women should have lower place in society, that women should not participate in the labor force as well as men. So it is likely that this is more driven to the views that are spread from one generation to another, rather than because of the institutions such as education, such as political parties, such as religious institutions. So it's likely, at least likely, to be connected more with the transition of value from one generation to another. I will discuss a few more examples in less details. And one example will be from Latin America. It will be example of Mita. Mita is a forced labor system which was used in the Spanish part of the Latin America. And what Mita required is actually to send a large percentage of the adult male population to work in mines. And the black border in the picture is a geographic boundary of the Mita, the territory where people were obliged to serve in Mita. To exploit the border, we actually need to assume something. Like, what ideally, how would we like to analyze the effect of Mita? We would like to see the territories that are pretty similar, but some of them are inside the boundary. So some of them were subject to Mita in the past, while others were not. So that's our ideal scenario. The thing is the following, that for the most part, the boundary, when we look at the two different sides of the boundary, so just inside and just outside of Mita, these territories are pretty different in terms of ethnic, in terms of the welfare. Let me be clear. These territories were different in the 16th century before introduction of the Mita. So these territories had different ethnic composition. These territories differed in religious and cultural norms, so they were pretty different. But for some part of the territory of Mita, namely, here you can see it with a whiter, more maybe gray boundary. which is called the study boundary in the article. So for this, for the territories nearby this boundary, the conditions before the introduction of Mita were more or less the same. So we could say that more or less the same people lived in the 16th century before introduction of the Mita, both inside and outside of the Mita, nearby the border. And some of these people were subject to Mita, while some others were not. And this allows us actually to understand the effect of Mita. This is actually a nice example of how economics interacts with history. To understand what is a good research strategy, to understand how we can use the data to answer some questions, we need to have a good historical description, and we need to get good historical understanding of what really happened in these territories. Knowing the ethnic composition, knowing the living conditions, knowing the agricultural and social norms of the communities who live there allows us to understand something and to be more or less sure, or at least sound compelling, when we are trying to understand the effect of Mita. So what are the effects of Mita? When we think about the households in Peru and Bolivia, just nearby and just outside of Mita, the introduction of Mita lowers consumption by 25% on average. Given the fact that very large share of these territories and very many households here are poor, it's pretty much. And the second thing is to notice is that the Mita was completely abolished in the beginning of 19th century. So the data for the households is taken almost 2 centuries after the Mita. So it's not just the instant effect of Mita, it is the effect for the ancestors who live 2 centuries ago, or 2 centuries after that. And that's a bit of a puzzle. Why this holds? Why we still see something that is not a reality for 2 centuries? It makes us a bit of historic pessimists in the sense that we feel it like a vicious circle which we can't easily go away with. Why actually this persists? There are some different explanations, and to try to understand it, they're in a bit larger framework. Maybe some of you have heard about the ideas of roving and stationary bandit. So the basic difference between roving and stationary bandit was proposed by Mark Rolson as 2 ways of seeing the government when it just evolved. So basically, Mark Rolson was trying to think of the government as a kind of a bandit who comes to the territory and is trying to exploit it. And when the bandit is roving, so when it goes through different territories, and the bandit has no incentives to think about what will happen with this territory in the future, while stationary bandit has more incentives to develop the territory. Not because the stationary bandit is good, but because stationary bandit, like the bandit who does not go away, wants to have something to extract in the future. So even if you are a bad guy, but you want to extract something in the future, you will invest, you will develop something in the territory because of your selfish and egoistic reasons. And Mita and the incentives that were created by Mita prevented the formation of the rural estates where there was an attached labor force. When you have an attached labor force in Latin America, it was called I hope it's hacienda. I hope it's pronounced this way. For the haciendas, the people who were the elite who was owning haciendas had incentives to develop them, because you have the territory, it is yours, you have the right, and you have the labor force that is attached to it. So you have intensive to invest in schooling, you have intensive to invest in the infrastructure to have the ability to extract more in the future. Because of the ways that Mita was developing, actually this for the territories outside of the Mita, it was much easier to develop the attached labor force, because basically you have, imagine that you have a very nice worker, and then the government takes the worker away to the mining, and obviously there is a high chance to die in the mining, because safety standards and unions developed much later. So you have much more incentives and much more reason to really care about the people, because why for? Okay, that's more or less all I wanted to say about Mita, and there will be, I think, one another reason, one other article I will discuss about the persistency of beliefs. And before that, I would like to say generally how we view beliefs. The beliefs and the things like prejudices are actually some heuristics that allows us to have rule of thumb when it is hard to understand whether you meet a bad guy or a good guy, when it's hard to understand whether you should trust a person or not. You can rely on some prejudice. For instance, if you lived in a society where it's better not to trust anyone, you will be likely not trusting anyone. And these beliefs, these prejudices, have some evolutionary logic. They allow an individual to have some information, some maybe not ideal, but some information pretty cheap. And obviously, these prejudices and beliefs will develop more when it's more relevant for them to. So this is in a certain way the economic view of on how we think about life, how we form our beliefs. We think about rationality. We think about the agent who is trying to live the best of the life, and think about how conditions and how the decisions by other people influence this formation of beliefs. One example where we can think about literally the same logic is the mistrust in Africa. In the territories where there was higher exposure to trade, to slave trade, there is for the predecessors of the people in Africa, there was a higher incentive to betray other people. I don't want to be a slave, and then I will tell the guys who came for slaves that, you know, there are 10 people hiding there, and I will not become a slave. So if you are an ancestor of the people who had developed, because of the historical circumstances, this way of thinking, you are less likely to trust. And when we look at the trust in Africa, we observe exactly the pattern we expected to see. I will skip some details about this article. The thing I would like to mention is that there are numerous studies of how the past influences today's lives. There are some studies about anti-Jewish policy in Russian Empire and in Europe, actually, about medieval experience of independence in northern Italy. There is some nice study about how trust was formed for some merchants in Italy and how it influences the people who have been merchants today. there are some nice studies that exploit the prehistorical data, like the ones we have seen with the Plow, and they're trying to understand why some people care more about future while some others care less. And these studies are largely motivated by history and social sciences, and they lead to the formation of some subfields in economics that develop particularly these questions, like economic history, institutional economics, development economics. So if you want to know more about that, it is like we should try to see. Now I think I will take maybe a few more minutes. Do I have them?
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, to give some very small examples of whether we can change the views, and it's a big topic to describe it fully. So I will use just maybe 2 or 3 examples about whether we can trust ourselves. So we established that there are some views that developed in the past, and you have never heard about the reasons behind them, and then you are still more likely to believe in some things because of the events that happened centuries ago. And can we really trust our views? Because we would like to believe that we are rational people, or we are at least smart people who know why we think so. And this is a funny example from an article about, maybe seminal article in Law and Economics. So there is a largely developing field in the intersection of law and economics that analyzes decisions made by Jews, the analysis of different law systems and how they influence our lives. Okay, what is here on the graph? The horizontal axis is the different order of the cases in courts. So on the left we have the very first cases during the day, and in the end the very last cases at the same day. And the vertical axis is a proportion of favorable decisions. So in favor of the one who is in the favor of we see 2 sudden peaks. So we see some decrease in a proportion of favorable decisions, and then we see a sudden increase. Then we again see a decrease, and then an increase. Do you have any guess what's happening between there? What's happening during these spikes? So it's the same day, and in the day there are 2 times after each the proportion of favorable decisions by judges goes up. So something happens, and then the judge becomes much kinder as a person. Break, yes, and exactly, yes, to be separate, yes, exactly. Just before the lunch and just before the dinner, the judges turns out to be evil. And then just after the dinner, for some reasons, the judge is very happy and is ready to get free no matter what. And it's not a good thing, because like we would like to have the rule of law, we would like the judge to strictly follow, and then we just look at the data and see the opposite of what we would like to expect. Like there is no corruption, there is nothing like bad about that. Like there is no judge who does this intentionally. But the subconscious sometimes is much stronger than we would like it to be. Something that I would like to quickly mention is, can we really change the views? Some people believe that views can be changed by education, and to some extent it's true. A nice example of that is change in political science curriculum in China. it actually led to higher support of Chinese political and economic institutions. So to some extent, yes, education can change the way we think about life. And that's maybe one prospect of what we can do. Like if we have some gender unequal norms, we can try to use education as a source of changing the norms. It may help. Another thing is actually institutions. Before that, I mentioned that even the ancestors of the migrants, despite that they are living in a very different institutional structure, they still have some old school norms. But at the same time, strict law enforcement sometimes helps. A nice example of that is a parking by diplomats in New York City. Before that, there was a diplomatic immunity, and in diplomats from high corruption countries have many parking violations because they have diplomatic immunity and nobody could do anything with them. But after that, the mayor of New York City was furious, and he managed to like restrict the diplomatic immunity, and now the embassies had to actually pay the bills, have to pay if there are some parking violations, and that actually leads to significant decrease in the number of parking violations. So sometimes when people have to pay for their beliefs, when beliefs become costly, people actually tend to care more. So maybe it's another way to change what we have if we don't like it. So there is more or less everything I wanted to say. If there are some questions, I'm ready to answer. But otherwise, thank you for coming. It's a great pleasure for me.
Artem, thank you for a wonderful lecture. It was really interesting to find some new things from it. I actually have one question, maybe if to give some time for you all to think about and write it in the chat or tell it. I don't expect that there is a good answer for it, but still, if the men were involved in the plow working in the field, why women were not involved in the general decision-making, having more free time?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good question. So I think part of the answer is the following. Let me move to this slide. So one thing is the following. I think they had a very specific question to ask. The question they asked, here is the question. So when jobs are scarce, men should have more right to a job. So it was a very specific way of thinking about what is a gender norm. So what is a gender role? It's not about whether men and women should have the same rights, for instance. The authors do not have a clear explanation why they use exactly these questions, because they use the data from both various stories, and they don't think about the decision rules, the power, and all the stuff. They think only about the labor market. So it's also unclear for me. So, but there is a kind of problem with the publication bias. So when you have some results and they are significant, you find some fancy effect you can describe, you publish it. When you find no effect, you can publish. So maybe there was no effect on that, and there is no article because of that.
Okay. Well, I see no questions in the chat from you guys. So Artem, thank you again. I want to remind everyone that this is the first of upcoming lectures in the training ground. Next one will be about how we learn to learn. The advertisement will be in the Telegram group chat, the training ground one. We invite you all to join it, of course, if you didn't already. And we are starting the training bot for economics multiple choice questions. It will also be in the chat there with a link. And oh yeah, here is a slide with this. So if you wish, scan it and join us. So Artem, thank you again. Everyone, glad to see you and see you soon.